Chapter 14. The mountain lion was crouched on a boulder a little above the trail, her pale gold eyes trained intently on Stacy. Everest pushed protectively in front of her and Paige, fur bristling along his spine. The lion's ears flattened slightly, her muscles tensing and her long tail switched from side to side. She looked ready to leap. Mountain lions don't usually attack people, Stacy reminded herself, remembering a book on wildlife she had read back in the taiga. And she certainly won't attack the wolves, not unless she's frightened and she doesn't see another way out. The only one of her pack really in danger was Paige. As if she'd come to the same conclusion, Paige pressed against Stacy's leg, whimpering slightly. Basil stepped forward beside Everest, blocking the little dog from the mountain lion's view. Everest growled at the mountain lion in tense, preparing to lunge. Somebody's going to get hurt. "Stop!" Stacy said urgently, wrapping an arm around Everest's neck and pulling him backward. "This is her home." The huge alpha gave her a look of annoyance, but slightly relaxed his tense stance, no longer poised to attack. Careful not to turn her back on the mountain lion, Stacy let go of Everest and glanced out the corner of her eye at the rest of the pack. Noah and Tucker were poised to back up Basil and Everest if a fight broke out, while Addison was looking thoughtful. Wink stood protectively beside Paige, his usually playful expression now serious. "Everyone calm down," Stacy said. She tried to remember what the book said to do when you encounter a mountain lion. "Try to look big," it had said. "Maintain eye contact. Don't turn your back on them, and whatever you do, don't run." You guys, if that were me, I'd be like, I'm running. Stacy raised her arms above her head, spreading them wide. "Back away," she told her pack. "We're not going to attack her in her own territory. She belongs here. We're just visiting." She kept her own emerald eyes on the golden gaze of the lion and took a step backward. "It's okay," she said in a calm voice. "We're not here to fight you. We're leaving." Stacy backed away a little farther. "Come on, guys," she said. Reluctantly, the wolves shuffled backward. With a final long look at them, the mountain lion turned, slipped quietly down from the boulder, and disappeared from sight among the red rocks and scrubby thorn bushes of the slope. Stacy let out a relieved breath and lowered her arms. "I think we should follow a different trail," she told the others. Everest huffed in agreement. Scrambling back down the steep pathway, one hand on Addison's back for balance, Stacy kept a sharp eye out for other animals. As they found another trail that wound high into the mountains, Stacy could tell the rest of her pack was keeping watch as well. Basil kept dashing ahead to scout the territory, her fur flashing white through the underbrush as she made wide circles and then returned. Everest, Tucker, and Addison paused frequently to scent the air and look around suspiciously, and Wink stuck close to Paige's side, guarding his small friend. When Noah stopped dead in his tracks, pricked up his ears, and sniffed the air, Stacy thought he was checking for another mountain lion. But then the blue-eyed wolf shot off the trail as if he'd been launched out of a cannon, scrambling up the steep side of the mesa. The rest of the pack watched, heads jerking up in surprise, then started to follow him one by one. Stacy grabbed hold of the thick fur between Tucker's shoulders to help herself up the slope. After a few steps, she heard a whine behind her. Stacy turned and saw Paige trying to scramble after them. Wink was below Paige, trying to help by nudging her forward. The mountainside was too steep for the little dog. How could she carry Paige and climb at the same time? Paige was just a little too big to fit into Stacy's satchel with the supplies already in there. While Stacy hesitated, Wink lay down on his belly and Paige climbed onto his back, taking hold of the tufted fur at the back of his neck with her teeth. "Good thinking, Wink," Stacy said. "Can you hang on, Paige?" Both Wink and Paige wagged their tails. As they climbed the slope, Paige, Addison, and Wink all kept sniffing the air, their eyes bright with excitement, their ears perked up. It was clear that all three of them could hear and smell something. Stacy couldn't. But after what seemed like an endless time of hot, exhausting climbing, she finally heard it. Running water. It was just a trickle, not a rushing river, but there was definitely some water up ahead. The sound gave Stacy new energy. The prickly pear fruit had helped to quench their thirst, but the thought of actual water was amazing. When she and Addison, followed by Wink with Paige on his back, finally scrambled up to the ledge on the top of the cliff, at first they didn't see the rest of the pack. Instead, there was a flat ledge, and on the cliff face, a dark square opening supported by heavy timbers. Stacy looked at it dubiously. "It's definitely man-made," she said. "It looks a little like the iron mine back in the taiga. You don't think... The sound of water was coming from inside. Cautiously, Stacy walked forward to peer in, Addison and Wink on either side of her, Paige still riding proudly on Wink's back. Inside, the square entrance opened into a wide cave. Stacy stepped inside. It was dark and refreshingly cool after the heat of the mesa. Taking a deep breath, she let the cold soak into her skin and began to cool her down. She could hear splashing and saw a flash of white fur. Something glittered in the rock wall. As her eyes adjusted, Stacy realized that she couldn't see the back of the cave. It seemed to go on, disappearing into darkness like a vast tunnel. She could see the marks of picks on the walls. There was a broken-down old cart close to the entrance and a pile of objects near it. Examining the pile, Stacy saw a couple of picks and hammers with wooden handles and a ragged old sack. It's an abandoned gold mine, Stacy realized. The cave really was the entrance to a huge tunnel, which must go on and down into the heart of the mesa. Addison's cool nose touched Stacy's hand, calling her attention back to the cave. There was a happy yelp. Basil, she thought, and splashing over to her right. Wink and Paige hurried past her, eager to join the fun. She and Addison followed. Near the side of the tunnel, a spring bubbled up from the ground and ran down the rock deeper into the cave. Noah was lying happily in the middle of the spring, water flowing over him, plastering his fur to the sides. Everest stood beside him, his big paws sunk into the water, and an expression of pure happiness on his face. Paige, Tucker, Basil, and Wink had their noses in the water, and Addison joined them, dipping her face down to take a long drink. Fresh water! Now that she saw it, Stacy was suddenly thirstier than she had ever been. She waded into the spring, which came up only a few inches above her ankles, and bent down, cupping her hands to scoop up the water. She drank in long, deep gulps, the cold water running down her throat. Water streamed over her feet, cooling and refreshing her, and she drank and drank. When she finally wasn't thirsty anymore, Stacy waded back out to the spring to investigate the mine. Paige followed her, shaking her thick coat vigorously as soon as she was out and splattering Stacy with more water. Everest came too, his heavy fur dripping. Stacy couldn't tell how far back or how deep into the mountain the mine went. A few steps past where the rest of the wolves were still playing in the water, it became too dark to see. "Hello, hello," she called, and her voice echoed back as though the mine shaft went on a very long way. Milo took off into the darkness off the mine shaft. You don't think there's anything else alive in here, do you?" she asked, and Everest snorted and shook his head. "No, I'm sure you checked." Before he drank, Everest would have scented the cave carefully to make sure no other animals were living there. Retreating a little from the darkness of the mine shaft, Stacy looked around the mine entrance again. It was a wide cave with a level floor. The spring ran along one side, but the rest of the mine entrance seemed pretty dry. It was pleasantly cool after the heat of the mesa, but not too cold. Light came in from the entrance. "We'd be sheltered in here," Stacy thought, looking up at the cave roof, "and we could even build a fire on the ledge right outside." This was much better than where they'd made camp before. "Are you thinking what I'm thinking?" she asked Everest. The silver-eyed alpha looked slowly around the mine entrance and back up at her. Then, deliberately, he lay down on the cave floor and sprawled out, looking totally relaxed. Paige yipped and licked his ear. "That's right," Stacy said, and sat down beside him. The stones were smooth and cool beneath her. "Home, sweet home, until we can go back to the taiga." And that's the end of that chapter.